Good morning. Today I'll be taking class on complications of diabetes mellitus. Last class I had taken the acute complications of diabetes mellitus, that was diabetic ketoacidosis and hyperglycemic hyperosmolar state HHS. Today I will be taking class on other complications of diabetes mellitus. Last class itself I told the complications can be divided into acute complications and chronic complications. In acute complications, important ones were DKA, HHS. So today I will be taking the other important acute complication of diabetes mellitus, that is hypoglycemia. So what is hypoglycemia? Hypoglycemia is nothing but low blood glucose levels. Hypo means less. So the blood glucose levels are reduced in our body. That is called as hypoglycemia. Hypoglycemia can be documented by Whipple's triad. So what is this Whipple's triad? So you need to have, triad means three diagnostic criteria to say that it is a triad. So it is named it as Whipple's triad. So in this first one, there should be symptoms which are consistent with hypoglycemia. Second part is the low glucose concentration measured with precise method. So you need to document that there is a low plasma glucose concentration. And the third one is relief of these hypoglycemic symptoms once you raise the glucose levels. So this is Whipple's triad. See, hypoglycemia is most commonly caused by drugs which are used to treat diabetes mellitus or due to exposure of some other drugs, especially in alcoholics. The lower limit of fasting glucose concentration is usually 70. So usually our fasting glucose is maintained between 70 to 110 milligram per dl. What are the causes of hypoglycemia? Already I told you it is drugs. Drugs, usually the patient, already a diabetic patient who is on insulin or insulin secretagogue drugs like sulfonylureas. So more chances that the patient will go in for hypoglycemia. So others are like alcohol. So there are critical illnesses like patient is in sepsis, patient is having hepatic, renal or cardiac failure, then also the patient can develop hypoglycemia. Hormone deficiency like growth hormone, cortisol, glucagon and epinephrine. So these are all the counter regulatory hormones which are required whenever the glucose level goes down. So if these hormone deficiencies are there, then the patient can develop hypoglycemia. Then we have non-isolate cell tumor, example mesenchymal tumors. Then fifth cause is endogenous hyperinsulinism. So excessive production of insulin in our body. Example is insulinoma. So insulin secreting tumors in our body can also lead to hypoglycemia. Then disorders of gluconeogenesis and fatty acid oxidation. So if there is defective gluconeogenesis and fatty acid oxidation, patient can have hypoglycemia. Excessive exercise. Patient is continuously exercising without taking any food, definitely the patient can have hypoglycemia. Sometimes accidental surreptitious hypoglycemias can also occur. So these are the causes of hypoglycemia in adults. What are the clinical manifestations of this hypoglycemia? So before going for the clinical manifestations of hypoglycemia, what you have to remember is that once the plasma glucose falls just below this physiological range, that is less than 70, then the glucose counter regulatory hormones, I told you, that is glucagon, epinephrine, so they will come into play, and they will try to increase the glucose levels by stimulating hepatic glucogenolysis and as well as gluconeogenesis. So these are the important hormones which act which act in the acute phase of hypoglycemia. So what are the clinical manifestations? Clinical manifestations are palpitations, tremors, and patient will be having anxiety. So these are all adrenergic symptoms which is mediated by sympathetic postganglionic neurons. And also patient will experience excessive sweating, hunger, and paresthesia can be present. And there can be, when you examine the patient, there will be diaphoresis, increase in pulse rate and increase in systolic blood pressure, and patient can have behavioral changes, there can be confusion, there can be seizures, patient will feel fatigue, and even patient will develop loss of consciousness and sometimes arrhythmias. If hypoglycemia is very severe, then sometimes even death can occur. If the recognition of hypoglycemia is not done, if it is not treated, then patient can even have death. So these are the clinical manifestation of hypoglycemia. See, what are the physiological responses that occur when the plasma glucose level falls? I already told you that the normal fasting plasma glucose is 70 to 110 milligram per dl, and there will be a raise in the blood glucose level after we consume food. So, but whenever the blood glucose comes between 80 to 85 milligram per dl, there is decrease in the insulin levels in our body. So that is the first defense against hypoglycemia. So what does that low insulin levels will do? They reduce the glucose utilization in the peripheral tissues, and also they induce the lipolysis, proteolysis, so that they can increase the gluconeogenic precursors. So thus it is the first defense against hypoglycemia. So blood glucose level is between 80 to 85 milligram per dl. There is decrease in insulin levels. So once the blood glucose level comes to 65 to 70 milligram per dl, there is an increase in pancreatic alpha cell glucagon. And also the other hormone is adrenomedullary epinephrine, which plays a primary role if there is a absent glucagon or decreased glucagon release. So the first defense was decrease in insulin, second defense is increase in glucagon and increase in epinephrine level. Then after, if the hypoglycemia is prolonged for about 4 hours, approximately 4 hours and more, then the other hormones come into picture, that is cortisol and growth hormones. They also support the glucose production and they restrict glucose utilization to a limited amount. So these hormones, they don't have any role in defense against the acute hypoglycemia, because only once the hypoglycemia is for a longer duration, that is more than 4 hours, then only these hormones come into play. If the glucose levels are going between 50 to 55 milligram per dl, then the patient will start developing all the hypoglycemic clinical manifestations which we discussed in the previous slide. So, and if the glucose is less than 50 milligram per dl, then the patient will have impaired cognition. That is, the patient will develop neuroglycopenic manifestations of hypoglycemia, which are the direct result of CNS glucose deprivation. So the brain requires glucose as the primary source of energy. It cannot produce the glucose, it cannot produce glucose from the gluconeogenic precursors, as well as it cannot store the glucose when it is in excess amount in the form of glycogen. So it can only use glucose and glucose. So in this hypoglycemia topic, so if the patient is already having diabetes mellitus, you should know that the patient would have developed autonomic failure, that is called as HAAF, that is hypoglycemia associated autonomic failure. So here what happens, there are two mechanisms in hypoglycemia associated autonomic failure. One is the defective glucose counter regulation and the other one is the hypoglycemia unawareness. So what is this defective glucose counter regulation? See, the glycemic threshold for the sympathoadrenal response in patients those who are already diabetic will be shifted to lower plasma glucose concentration. So whatever, for example, we are healthy individuals. In me, if the hypoglycemic symptoms are appearing at around 60 milligram per dl, in a diabetic individual, it will be shifted to a lower plasma glucose concentration. Even though it is going to 50, he might be asymptomatic. Okay, the glycemic threshold for the sympathoadrenal response, the counter-regulatory hormones will be produced in a, the response of counter-regulatory hormones will be shifted to lower plasma glucose concentration. Why this shift occurs? This shift is typically the result of recent antecedent iatrogenic hypoglycemia, because patient is already getting treated with insulin, other insulin secretagogues. So patient will be having very strict glucose control, as well as they will be going in for repeated hypoglycemic episodes. So because of this, the patient threshold for sympathoadrenal response will be shifted to the lower glucose level, and affected patients are at more than 25-fold greater risk of severe iatrogenic hypoglycemia during intensive glycemic therapy. This is defective glucose counter regulation. The other one is the hypoglycemic unawareness. So there is a attenuated sympathoadrenal response to hypoglycemia, which causes the clinical syndrome of hypoglycemic unawareness. So that is, there is loss of warning adrenergic and cholinergic symptoms that previously allowed the patient to recognize developing hypoglycemic symptoms and therefore to avoid the episode of hypoglycemia by ingesting, that is not injecting, ingesting carbohydrates. So patient will have, so if we have hypoglycemic symptoms, suddenly we feel like we are very hungry and we'll go on ingesting food or the carbohydrate. But in case of hypoglycemic unawareness, that is because of the autonomic neuropathy, what happens, the patient will have attenuated sympathoadrenal response and the counter-regulatory hormones will not be released with at which whatever required amount it has to be released. So the symptoms of hypoglycemia will not be manifested and the patient will not try to abort this hypoglycemic episode by ingesting carbohydrate. This is called as hypoglycemic unawareness. So how are we going to treat the patient with hypoglycemia? So there are 4 steps in the treatment of hypoglycemia. One is you need to recognize that the patient is having hypoglycemia and you need to document it. How are you going to document? You need to check the blood glucose level and you have to document the hypoglycemic episode. Then once it is done, then you need to diagnose the hypoglycemic mechanism. Why did the patient develop hypoglycemic episode? Did the patient is already a diabetic patient and has he like not taken enough of food after taking the prescribed insulin and insulin secretagogues, or whether he has consumed alcohol? So you need to ask the history and you have to find out what is the cause for this hypoglycemic episode. then urgent treatment is required. So how are we going to treat the patient with hypoglycemia? So once you have documented that the patient is having hypoglycemia, you have asked the history why the patient has developed hypoglycemia, you need to treat the patient. So how are you going to treat the patient? See whether the patient is conscious, oriented, and is willing to take orally and oral treatment is possible, then give the oral food, or the glucose tablets will be there, or the glucose containing fluids like juices, candies, or any food which is containing glucose of around 15 to 20 gram will be sufficient. So if the patient is unable to take orally, then it is required that you start them on the parenteral therapy. So what parenteral therapy you are going to start? That is glucose. Usually what we use is 25% dextrose. In the clinical side, it comes in 100 ml solution which can be given intravenous. So that should be given like a bolus. So then later on you can give the glucose infusion, which is guided by serial plasma glucose measurements. If IV therapy is also not practical, sometimes you are not able to get the IV access, then you can give subcutaneous or intramuscular glucagon about 0.1, that is not 0.1, it is 1 milligram. So glucagon 1 milligram can be given subcutaneous or IM. So what does the glucagon do? Glucagon stimulates insulin secretion as well as it causes, the main important function is it leads to glycogenolysis. From the glycogen, the glucose will be produced to combat the hypoglycemia. So these treatments will raise the plasma glucose concentration only transiently, and the patient should therefore he need to be urged to eat as soon as it is practical to replete the glycogen store. Then you should keep in mind that the patient should be advised, or it should be educated to prevent the recurrent episodes of hypoglycemia. You need to tell them why the hypoglycemia is occurring, and you need to try to prevent the recurrent episodes of hypoglycemia. This is about hypoglycemia. How we are going to recognize the hypoglycemia, document it. Once you recognize the hypoglycemic signs and symptoms, you document the hypoglycemia, then you treat the hypoglycemia with either oral glucose containing food or a drink, or you can give the IV administration of 25% dextrose, which is very very important, because at a proper time, if you are not able to recognize the hypoglycemia and treat the hypoglycemia, then patient can even die. So very important acute complication in patients with, more commonly seen in patients with hypoglycemia, but even without diabetes mellitus, patient can have hypoglycemia. That you need to keep in mind. Then what are the other complications of diabetes mellitus? Very important, the other chronic complications of diabetes mellitus. See, chronic complications of diabetes mellitus, it can be divided into vascular complications and non-vascular complications. Vascular complications are again divided into subclasses like microvascular complications and microvascular complications. Microvascular are retinopathy, nephropathy, neuropathy. And macrovascular complications are coronary heart disease, peripheral arterial disease, and cerebrovascular disease. Then there are non-vascular complications like skin infections. So they are more prone to develop skin infections, cellulitis, carbuncle, and they have increased risk of developing hearing loss, dementia, and also the impaired cognitive function. So what are the mechanisms of these complications? See, during diabetes, patient is having chronic hyperglycemia in case of diabetes mellitus. But what is the exact mechanism for the pathogenesis of these complications, micro as well as the macrovascular complications? Exact mechanism is not known. There are only like hypothesis has been emerged. Like there could be epigenetic changes which will influence the gene expression in the affected cells. Then there are formation of advanced glycosylation end products which bind to specific cell surface receptors, and there is non-enzymatic glycosylation of intra and extracellular proteins. Then the third mechanism is increased glucose metabolism via the sorbitol pathway, which is related to enzyme aldose reductase. Then increased formation of diacylglycerol, so which will also alter the proteins in the endothelial cells, neuronal cells. And there is increase in certain growth factors. For example, VEGF, that is vascular endothelial growth factor, so which is which is increased locally in patients with diabetic retinopathy, and it decreases after laser photocoagulation. So few of the growth factors are implicated in the development of these complications. So the first important complication is the diabetic retinopathy. So you need to remember that diabetes mellitus is the leading cause of blindness between ages 20 to 74. So the diabetic retinopathy can be classified into two stages. One is the non-proliferative stage, then is the proliferative stage, and finally the patient will develop macular edema. See, non-proliferative stage appears late in the first decade or early second decade of diabetes mellitus. So once the patient develops diabetes mellitus late in the first decade, okay, so in the end of the 10th year in the beginning of the second decade. So it is marked by vascular microaneurysms, blot hemorrhages and cottonwool spots, non-proliferative retinopathy. So once there is appearance of neovascularization which in response to retinal hypoxemia, then it is the hallmark of proliferative diabetic retinopathy. So how are we going to treat diabetic retinopathy? So the most effective therapy is prevention, that is by intensive glycemic and blood pressure control, which will help to delay the progression or appearance of diabetic retinopathy. So regular comprehensive examinations are very much required for all individuals with diabetes mellitus. But what happens paradoxically during the first 6 to 12 months of this improved glycemic control, established diabetic retinopathy may transiently worsen. So then this progression is temporary, and in the long term improved glycemic control is associated with less diabetic retinopathy. So and dilated eye examination, that too performed by an ophthalmologist, is very much required, and the treatment is laser photocoagulation along with anti-VEGF therapy. So you need to directly inject, ocular injection is usually successful in preserving the vision. Aspirin therapy, that is given around the 650 milligram per day, it does not appear to influence the natural history of diabetic retinopathy, but still it is given to further decrease the further damage. Next complication is diabetic nephropathy. So diabetic nephropathy is also a leading cause of chronic kidney disease, end stage renal disease, and the CKD, which is requiring renal replacement therapy. And prognosis of individuals with diabetic nephropathy who are on dialysis is very poor. And diabetic nephropathy, if the patient is having diabetic nephropathy, then definitely patient is having diabetic retinopathy. And albuminuria with diabetes mellitus is associated with increased risk of cardiovascular disease. So only 20 to 40% of patients with diabetes will develop diabetic nephropathy. There are additional genetic and environmental susceptibility factors which are involved but still unidentified, which are required for the development of diabetic nephropathy. Glomerular hyperperfusion and renal hypertrophy occur in the first years after the onset of diabetes mellitus and are associated with an increase of eGFR. So initially there is an increase in the GFR, that is because of the glomerular hyperperfusion and hypertrophy. After 5 to 10 years of diabetes mellitus, many individuals begin to excrete a small amount of albumin in the urine. So that is called as albuminuria. So previously it was microalbuminuria, macroalbuminuria terminology was there. Now ADA, that is American Diabetes Association, no longer uses the term micro and macroalbuminuria. Instead, it uses only the term albuminuria, which refers to increased urinary protein excretion. How is it measured? By taking the spot urinary albumin to creatinine ratio. If it is more than 30 milligram per gram creatinine, then it is called as albuminuria. So screening for albuminuria should be performed annually in patients with diabetes mellitus for more than 5 years of duration. In case of type 2 diabetes mellitus patients, once they are diagnosed type 2 diabetes mellitus, every year you need to do the albuminuria screening. And in patients who are diabetic patients who are pregnant, you need to do the albuminuria screening. Patients with diabetes mellitus are also predisposed to radio contrast induced nephropathy. And risk factors for this radio contrast neuropathy include those who are already having pre-existing nephropathy and volume depletion. So you need to remember that diabetes mellitus patients who are undergoing radiographic procedure with contrast dye should be well hydrated before as well as after the dye exposure, and serum creatinine to be monitored every 24 to 48 hours following the procedure. They need to be monitored. How are we going to treat the patient with diabetic nephropathy? So improved glycemic control, strict blood pressure control, and administration of ACE inhibitors. See, improved glycemic control, it reduces the rate at which albuminuria appears and progresses in both the types of diabetes mellitus. But once there is large amount of albuminuria, so improved glycemic control will slow the progression of renal disease is not proven. Once it is already established proteinuria, then there are no evidence to state that improved glycemic control will improve the renal function. The second one is strict blood pressure control, which helps in reducing the albumin excretion as well as slowing the decline in renal function. So blood pressure should be maintained at less than 140/90 millimeters of mercury in individual with diabetes, and possibly, if possible, it should be less than 130/80 in individual with those who are at increased risk of cardiovascular diseases and those who are progressing to CKD. Then administration of ACE inhibitor ARBs to reduce the albuminuria and associated decline in GFR is very good in patient with diabetic nephropathy, and it is not mandatory to give both the drugs, ACE as well as ARB. Any one drug can be given. So there is no benefit if the ACE or the ARBs are given in combination. That is what, any one drug can be given, and nephrologist should be consulted once the albuminuria appears and GFR is less than 30 ml per minute per 1.7 meter square of the body surface area. Then the other complications of diabetes mellitus are diabetic neuropathy, so which occurs in approximately 50% of the individuals with long-standing type 1 and type 2 diabetes mellitus. The commonest neurological manifestation is distal symmetric polyneuropathy, that is called as DSPN, and they commonly present with distal sensory loss, peripheral sensory loss and pain. But most of the time, that means in 50% of the patient will not give any loss of sensory sensation, any history of loss of sensation. Instead of that, they will be complaining of numbness, tingling, sharpness, or burning sensation which begins in the feet and spreads proximally. And most commonly, they will complain at night. These symptoms are very common during the night. So if you examine these patient, they often reveal sensory loss of deep tendon reflex, especially the ankle reflex, and abnormal joint position sense, and muscular atrophy or the foot drop can be seen. So how we are going to examine this patient? You need to start in case of type 1 diabetes mellitus, once they are diagnosed, once in every after they complete the 5th year of their diagnosis, you need to start examining their peripheral nerves. But in case of type 2 diabetes mellitus, you need to start immediately. There is one more neurological abnormality which occur in patients with diabetes mellitus, that is autonomic neuropathy. So there is dysfunction of cholinergic, noradrenergic system. The most common manifestation of this autonomic neuropathy is the patient will be having orthostatic hypotension. That is one important autonomic neuropathy manifestation. Other than that, the patient will have, this is also more common, that is the gastrointestinal abnormalities. The patient will have gastroparesis and GI motility disorders, and patient will be having indigestion, constipation, then genitourinary problems. Patient will be having urinary increased frequency, or patient can have excessive sweating. Hyperhidrosis can be there, or decreased sweating can be there. All these symptoms are because of autonomic neuropathy. So other complications like there can be like single cranial nerve involvement, like mononeuropathies can occur. The commonest cranial nerve which is involved in type 2 diabetes mellitus is the third cranial nerve. And the patient will come with diplopia. So, and physical examination will reveal that the patient is having ptosis, and ophthalmoplegia will be there, and pupillary constriction will be there. There are other cranial nerves can also get affected, like cranial nerve 4, 6 or 7th, leading to Bell's palsy can also be affected. So peripheral mononeuropathies can occur, that is called as mononeuropathy multiplex can occur. Then diabetic radiculopathy, polyradiculopathy. So all these are the neurological manifestations of diabetes mellitus. So again, how we are going to treat the patient with diabetic neuropathy? So that is prevention of diabetic neuropathy is towards the glycemic control. Very, very important. For all the complication, it is the diabetic control, glycemic control is the mainstay of prevention as well as the treatment, and they need to avoid all the like toxic substances like alcohol consumption, smoking. These need to be stopped, and they should be supplemented with B complex tablets, that is vitamin B12, folic acid. All these need to be supplemented for this patient. If they are having chronic painful and they are having a problem with this diabetic neuropathy, they are not able to sleep, numbness is severe, burning sensation is severe, then the patient can be prescribed with certain FDA approved drugs like duloxetine, pregabalin can be given. There is one more drug called the tapentadol, which is a centrally acting opioid that is also FDA approved, but the risk of addiction is more with these opioid drug. So this is about the important complications of chronic complications of diabetes mellitus. After 4 classes about diabetes mellitus, so now diabetes mellitus is over. So you need to know diabetes is very important, and one or the other question will definitely be there from diabetes mellitus. Diabetic ketoacidosis is very important, then insulin, then how you are going to treat the diabetes mellitus, and these are the complications, hypoglycemia. So anything can be asked for 10 mark, 5 mark, or 3 mark. So read about diabetes mellitus. If you have any doubt, when you come back you can always ask, or you can sit and read in the textbook if you want more in detail about diabetes mellitus. So this covers diabetes mellitus. Next class will be other topic. Thank you.